Hi, this is a follow-on video from the one on emotional regulation, and I wish to concentrate more on one of the major parts of it, the core aspect, which is affect labeling, which is a couple of nondescript words. At least they trouble me for their lack of precision in certain respects, or meaning, because they don't really get used in any other context but what we're talking about now. And affect labeling is an intrinsic part of what's deemed to be called emotional processing. It is a concept which was fairly strongly developed by Professor Gross at Stanford some 20 years ago, and it was further explored by two people at UCLA called Tor and Lieberman, who actually landed upon, through their research and the understanding, which is now quite clear, that affect labeling is an intrinsic part of the emotional regulation system, or the cycle that is necessary for we as human beings to actually understand ourselves and where we are, both within the emotional aspects but also the cognitive, operational aspects of one's lives. And when that gets out of kilter, that's when you get these manifestations of these various conditions like PTSD and ADHD, bipolar, and so forth, with consequent effects on the levels of distress, of anxiety and depression, and other coordinated behaviors of perhaps weight gain and lack of sleep or a bad sleep cycle. So that's what the surrounding elements are. But in people who've got a fairly well flowing system, should we say, the emotional processing takes place both at a conscious and an unconscious level. And it's more of the unconscious level, which is, as it rightly speaks, is submerged, but it's there nonetheless as a operative part of the process, which allows us to be in touch with ourselves and coordinate our behaviors. And it's the failure of that system which actually is the root cause of emotional dysregulation. Consequently, I'd just like to delve a bit deeper into that at the neurofunctional level, so that you can see where it thinks and how it spins off into the things which you might be able to link up with yourself in your own circumstances. Essentially, continuously the brain is operating, sending out signals in order to see what's going on in the environment, and then we take those back in. This is a model that's been developed by a guy called Friston at UCL in London, and essentially it seems to be operating in a certain way that we're trying to do error minimization. We send out signals, get signals back, and then we differentiate between the two and then carry on. It's in sort of the initiative cycle. When that fails, you end up with this dysregulatory, more chaotic, disordered exercise that doesn't allow for you to be able to review, either consciously or unconsciously, the information that's coming back. And it's that interrupted information flow which is at the root cause of this emotional dysregulation. How this operates, and when the broad interrupter of that is this emotional blindness called alexithymia, which I've described in the website and things like that. I call it emotional blindness. I want to use words that readily more attribute themselves to your own experience rather than what the scientists say as such. So I'm a bit of a translator, if you'll allow me. And this alexithymia can be acquired through chronic stress, through a trauma or multiple traumas, both long time ago or more recent. Van der Kolk, one of the great psychologists of the late 20th century, early 21st century, has written about this in his book, The Body Counts the Cost, which you may or may not be familiar. I urge you to read that because I think it's a fairly good, relatable book that gives an insight to one's own situation. But the question is how do you get out of this situation? And that's where I hope that we might be able to provide some how through through understanding the whys and the wherefores. Essentially, when people are in a state of where they are not able to interpret the signals of what their situation is, at the conscious level this happens, and you become reactive and emotional levels go up significantly, and this therefore in turn causes other aspects of poor sleep, maybe disordered eating or eating patterns, which then contribute to greater daytime sleepiness, which then causes more depression and levels of inefficacy, that's the word, which is a very poor downward spiral in many ways, which a lot of people seem to be caught in that cycle. So by giving this information to you now, I'm hoping you can understand what the cycle actually is, so that you can say, okay, well, if I can reverse that cycle or break that cycle or stop that cycle, it puts you in a better position. This is what the tests we've actually done with people which suggest that this is actually the case. But when you're in a position where you don't have those antennae out, should we say, your brain's not sending out signals, which is deactivation in the anterior cingulate cortex, which controls or is coupled normally with the amygdala. The amygdala is out of control and sending out stuff and cortisol into your blood, and you're all over the place. And that's one of the awful aspects of this continuous overwhelm things or complete absence of flatline, a bit like the sea behind us, albeit it's very, very calm and actually a lovely day. So the process of affect labeling is intrinsic to the emotional processing required in order for you to understand where you are, both at the visceral level or this sort of the sense of oneself. And a lot of people have lost that sense of themselves, and therefore with the consequence, they get into a state of repeated cycles or which reinforce each other, which provide further disordered position without any sort of benefits, and total disbenefits, we may say so. But what we do by affect labeling, which means just being able to understand at a very primary level what your mental state is, which the AI powered of Verenigma provides, because by leaving a voice note, you actually get a readout of what your actual state is. The process of actually looking, visualization, and seeing what that situation is directly, even without saying, oh, I've got stress, I've got depression, I've got this much that, but you clock it, actually has the effect of stimulating, instantiating, initiating greater activation in the anterior cingulate cortex, with also a decrease in the reactivity of the amygdala. It's somewhat diminution. Now, there was a philosopher in the 17th century or 16th century called Spinoza, who actually encompassed it in a term. He had a philosophical insight into this one, which essentially says, once you've put a label to your emotions, to your suffering, it doesn't go away, but it's contained. And that's the diminution that we're describing through the neuronal activation of the anterior cingulate cortex. That's when you've actually got it, when you've labeled it explicitly. Implicitly, that still takes place. It doesn't require great guidance. It just means actually using the system once or twice a day. And over time, and through the days, you actually increase the benefits of the activation of the anterior cingulate cortex, creates that greater efficacy over the amygdala, which means you get a reduction in the emotional dysregulation as a whole, but with consequent effects, as we've found through the structural equation modeling we've done on the results that we've gained through a sleep trial we finished in January. We're doing another one, which we're presently waiting results for those who've got ADHD, sleep problems, overweight, and alexithymia, this emotional blindness. We're hoping to see a consequent reduction, and the pathways is that the emotional blindness is driving emotional dysregulation, which in turn affects your levels of depression and also anxiety. Consequently, improve your emotional awareness, you say in the broader sense of the word, through this neuronal activation of the visualization through effect labeling. Consequently, you end up with better emotional regulation and therefore reduced depression in particular. And the early results of the 14-day intermission we've done so far suggests that is looking quite promisingly the case. Albeit I don't wish to prejudge the whole thing. This is what we had hypothesized and what we would anticipate being the results of it. So we've slightly widened the ambit of what we're doing in order to be able to incorporate what people's more wider the problem, you don't have one problem, you tend to have two or three at the same time, and it's which ones to deal with first. This is probably the easy way, not easy, but it is, although it is an easy way, to be able to anticipate and get a handle on it and make one's life much more livable. Notwithstanding you might be taking medication or not, probably some of the medication stuff may not actually be working in the aims, your specific aims as far as emotional regulation is concerned, whereas you might be seeking to gain greater focus or something like that, or to lose weight. But the ability for you to be able to acquire a means of being able to achieve a greater emotional awareness, losing that blindness so that you get better emotional regulation, is the core aspect of what we're seeking to achieve, and I believe we have achieved. Anyhow, thank you very much for listening. I hope it's been helpful. Just to say where I am right now, I'm down in Pevensey, which is where Caesar landed in Roman times to take over Britain, but also was the same location where William, Duke of Normandy, came over from France to fight with Harold at the Battle of Hastings just up the road in 1066. So, very quiet day, no conflict going on here, thankfully. Anyhow, have a good day, and I'll come back with something else hopefully be of interest to you. Thanks a lot.